9 out of every 10 people here want to see spring, not because of wolves, not because of war, but because the salt that could keep them alive is locked away behind doors guarded more fiercely than any fortress. This wasn't just winter. It was the kind of season that made neighbours watch each other starve, while barrels of smoked fish and salt sat untouched in the dark. Imagine it, you're gnawing dried skin off a fishbone in the street while a key, warmer than any hand, hangs on the belt of the man who swore to keep you safe. And if you think you'd do better, you wouldn't even last till Christmas. So before we step into that fog-bound coast, tell me this: if survival meant turning a lock while your neighbours froze outside, would you open the door or keep it shut? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into 2 nights' journey together. The boards under your boots creak over frozen mud. Crooked windows ripple the fog outside. Somewhere ahead, a church bell tolls just once, low and slow, like a warning no one wants to explain. The air outside feels older than the walls you've just left behind, heavy with the same salt that's been seeping into these beams for decades. Somewhere behind you, a door shuts softly, as if to keep the warmth in, or the cold out. You're not sure which. The street is empty in that way, only a winter morning can manage not abandoned, just holding its breath. Somewhere out there, the locked storehouses wait, their barrels stacked high in the dark. But for now, the fog is the only thing guarding them, and it's already found you. You step out from the shadow of the porch, your hand sliding over the rough plank rail, still warm from the morning fog. The lane to the wharf is wrapped in a thin skin of sea mist, the kind that clings to your wool like it's trying to pull you back inside. But the slow, hollow knock of waves beneath the pilings draws you on. Your first footfall onto the boards makes a sound, a thin, tired creak, like the bridge itself has had enough of these winters. Each step changes pitch high and dry where a plank's been replaced, low and hollow where the old wood's been eaten soft by salt. You can't help wondering how many feet have crossed here soldiers, merchants, wives hauling baskets of fish. The salt smell is thick enough to breathe like food, cut through with the coal smoke from the smithy up the street. Every deep inhale feels like swallowing a spoonful of coarse salt, the kind you'd pack meat in for the season. Up ahead, the church bell rings 3 times, and not for Sunday service, but like someone's counting down to something. You rest your hand on the rail. The wood is damp, tacky with cold. The paint's long gone, showing dark grain flecked with little crystals of salt. Down near the waterline, barnacles twitch with the tide's slow retreat. That mix of brine and rotting timber is both unpleasant and familiar, like the smell of an old storehouse that never quite airs out. In colonial America, wharves like this were often built from oak or white pine, joined with wooden pegs instead of iron nails. Nails rust too quickly in salt air. You remember an old man boasting this bridge had outlived 3 great storms and 1 harbour fire, like it was an elder of the town. Now, its creak sounds more like old bones, but it still holds same as the town through this endless winter. A sudden gust lashes across the water, carrying the forge's smoke until it stings your eyes. You're not sure if they water because of the smoke or because somewhere nearby, someone's burning saltfish down to scraps. At the far end of the boards, 2 men argue one swears the sea's gone from storms offshore. The other says it's divine punishment. You wonder if either would still be talking if they saw the ledgers in the magistrate's hall pages showing barrels of salt shipped upriver at triple the usual price. Would that change their prayers, or just give them a new name to curse? A plank groans under you, reminding you the bridge isn't just old, it's tired. You slow down, feeling like you're walking across something alive. It breathes in the hiss between its seams, groans when it takes your weight. Beneath you, the water slaps the pilings and leaves white foam clinging like an old man's beard. Nearing the end, you glance down at your boots. The leather's dark with damp, the stitching starting to fray at the sole. Nowadays, you'd toss them and buy a fresh pair of sneakers. Here, you've got a needle, some beeswax, and the hope the patching holds until spring. A barefoot child darts past, splashing up brackish water onto the boards. He clutches a bundle of wet seaweed fodder for animals, or if things get bad enough, for people. You smirk despite yourself, then notice the salt on your lips. You're not sure if it's from the fog or from your own sweat. Far ahead, on the other side of the harbour, a torchlight flickers, patrolmen from the docks making their way back. The glow is weak, unsteady, breathing like someone who's been running. It paints the warped planks in blotches, so they look mouldy. For a moment, you imagine it's not a man's torch at all, but something the sea is giving back. The bell tolls again. This time it sounds closer, heavier, like a heartbeat weighted with bad news. You don't know what it's warning of, but as your fingers grip the cold rail, one thing feels certain: there won't be many safe crossings on this bridge for much longer. You follow the boards down to where the tide should be, but instead of water there's a vast rippling sheet of white. At first you think it's frost, then the smell hits. It's not the clean sting of winter air, it's sweet in the wrong way. Thick and metallic with a sour edge that makes your eyes sting. You taste it before you realize you've opened your mouth. Out on the flats, the gulls move in jerks, hopping from body to body. The fish lie packed so close it's hard to see the salt between them. Scales dull and flake in the sun. Fins curl like old parchment. A man in a faded red coatone of the older fisherman stands barefoot on the edge, a gaff in one hand and a sack in the other. He waves you over. "Came in last night," he says, looking out at the silver-grey carpet. "Dead before they hit the sand. Quicker than we can take 'em." His voice is flat, but his eyes are bright in that way people get when they've seen something awful enough to feel important. He kicks one with his bare foot. It cracks under him like a thin shell. You step off the last board and feel the ground give a little under your boots, like a wet sponge. The crunch comes next, soft at first, then sharper when you put weight on it. You glance down. The fish beneath your sole splits open, releasing a burst of wet, foul air that makes you flinch back. A cluster of flies lifts off, the buzz high and angry, then settles again as if you were never there. "Don't step on the big ones," the man says, without looking at you. They're still soft inside. You hear the gulls squabble overhead, and one drops something an eye, maybe onto the flats. It lands with a wet sound that somehow feels louder than the wind. In colonial towns, a fish kill like this could mean more than a lost meal. It might mean spoiled water upstream, or an algae bloom choking the bay. If you believed the ministers some moral failing in need of penance, today we'd send samples to a lab. Here. You just watch the tide not come back and wonder who will be hungry first. A boy wades out, trousers rolled high, scooping with a woven basket. His father shouts to keep moving. Flies are worse on the warm patches. You notice the way they cling in black knots to certain fish, ignoring others, and feel your skin crawl. The air hums with their movement. "Quicker than we can take 'em," the fisherman repeats. He says it like a joke, but it's not the kind anyone laughs at. You think about the salted barrels back in town, the ones already aging in the storehouse. The irony, all this meat, and most of it too far gone to eat. A feast you can only watch rot. You crouch, run your glove over a small herring. The skin slips under your touch, and for a moment you imagine the same thing happening to your own hand, your own face, if you stayed out here too long. A shiver works its way up your back that has nothing to do with the cold. The man in red slings his sack over his shoulder, half full of heads. "Cats will be kings tonight," he says, and spits toward the waterline. You can't tell if he's bitter about it or just resigned. Maybe it's the same thing. What do you think it means when the sea gives up this much at once? A gift? Or a warning? They spot you before you spot them. 3 kids balanced on the edge of the flats where the fish bodies thin out, and the salt crust is strong enough to hold their weight. The oldest can't be more than 12. All of them are barefoot, their toes black with muck, but they're grinning like they've found buried treasure. The treasure is in their hands, fish bones, stripped clean and pale in the sun. One girl holds a spine almost as long as her arm, whipping it through the air so it whistles. The youngest has 2 ribs tied together with string, spinning them over his head like a sling. The middle one narrow face, missing a tooth as a jawbone, teeth still locked in place. His pretending it's a comb, dragging it through his hair with mock elegance. You can't help it, you smirk. Not because it's actually funny, but because the whole scene feels upside down. A modern kid would be inside, lost in a screen, thumb-scrolling through a world far away from dead fish and the smell of decay. Here, this is the entertainment, not an app, not a cartoon, just whatever the tide left behind. The air around them is alive with flies. They settle on the bones, crawl over the kids' hands, buzz up again in angry swirls when shooed. The children don't flinch. They've been out here too long for flinching. You're the only one who keeps brushing at your neck. Sure, something just landed there. A cart rolls past behind you, and a neighbour mutters about how even the gulls are leaving it now. You look back at the children. The girl with the spine has found a flat skull, maybe a flounder, and holds it up to her face, peering through the empty eyes. The youngest shrieks with laughter, his voice bouncing off the bare boards of the wharf. In colonial towns, it wasn't rare for children to play with what adults called waste fish bones, broken tools, anything that didn't go to the fire or the garden. Archaeologists still dig up tiny carved toys made from the same stuff. Little effigies of animals or ships, smoothed by small hands. You try to picture these 3 centuries from now. They're makeshift slings and combs found in the silt, catalogued as children's artifacts. The thought lands somewhere between charming and tragic. One of them spots you watching and holds out his jawbone comb like an offering. You shake your head, not trusting your smile to come out right. He shrugs and keeps playing, running the bone down his forearm to leave a row of pale marks in the salt grit on his skin. There's a shift in the wind. The smell sharpens, less briny, more rot. You notice a few of the bones they've left on the ground aren't quite picked clean bits of flesh, clinging in the creases, drying to a yellow-brown. The flies prefer those. You wonder if the kids will wash their hands before supper. The oldest girl has set her spine down and started stacking vertebrae into a little tower, each ring balanced on the one before it. It wobbles as she adds the 6th, then collapses in a dry rattle. She laughs, but it's a quick laugh, over too soon, like she knows you saw. Doesn't matter, she says. Or make another. She kicks the pile apart, scattering the pieces into the salt. Something in the way she says it leaves you colder than the wind. Maybe it's the matter-of-fact tone, like rebuilding out of what's left is the only game there's ever been. Behind you, the church bell starts again. The kids don't pause. The gulls wheel and cry overhead, but the sound barely reaches the ground where they play. For a moment, the whole world narrows to the pale bones, the buzzing flies, and the way their laughter hangs in the heavy air. If you dug up the moment centuries from now, would it look like joy or like warning? The smell reaches you before you see the sauce-thick, sweet and wrong, like rum gone rancid. It pours out of the apothecary's open door in waves so strong you almost feel it coating your face. It's the kind of smell that doesn't just hit your nose. It plants itself there. A tenant you didn't invite. A rat darts from the alley, pauses mid-step as if it's run into an invisible wall, and veers off without looking back. You almost want to follow it. Inside, the shelves are crowded with brown bottles and squat jars sealed in wax, their labels written in the looping hand of someone who's convinced legibility is optional. Ink bleeds at the edges from the damp. The chi-thu, though here, in this town, people just call him Doctor without a hint of irony, stands over a wide-mouthed jug. He presses a mat of green-brown seaweed into the liquid with the flat of his bare palm, as if trying to drown it. His fingers are stained the colour of moss. His nails look chewed down. Which is not something you want to think about too hard when the man handles things people are meant to swallow. Best thing for it, he says, not looking up. Warms the blood. Pushes out the sickness. He says it with the certainty of someone quoting scripture or someone who's learned the trick of never pausing after a lie. You wonder if he believes it, or if he just knows that desperate people will drink anything that smells like it costs more than they can spare. In colonial ports, seaweed steeped in spirits was used for fevers, scurvy, bad air ailments. It was easy to harvest, harder to choke down, and profitable precisely because of that. No one here talks about bacteria. They talk about humours, vapours. God's will. You picture trying to explain a virus to this man, watching his eyes glaze over until he changes the subject to something he can measure in ounces and coin. He lifts the jug, corks it with a twist, and wipes his hand on his apron, leaving a smear that could be algae or blood. 2 swallows at dawn, 2 at dusk, he says, sliding it toward you. Don't sniff before you drink. Makes it worse. His tone carries the faintest amusement, like he's seen enough people gag to find it funny. You don't touch it. The scent alone is enough brine up front, followed by a sweet rot that suggests kelp left in the sun a day too long. It clings to the back of your throat from nothing more than breathing. Somewhere in your head, a voice says you'd rather take your chances with the fever. Outside, leaning against the wall. A woman coughs into a rag she keeps folding and refolding, as though the movement could hide the stains. Her skin is pale in a way that has nothing to do with cold. The wind shifts, carrying the doctor's brew past her. Her eyes close, not in disgust, but in hope. You can't decide if that's worse. The street ahead feels narrower than usual, boxed in by the heavy air salt and rot from the shore braided together with the sour alcohol smell from behind you. Somewhere farther off, the church bell tolls again slower now, like it's tired too. You think of the kids on the flats, their hands greasy with fish oil, touching their eyes, their mouths. You think of the gulls landing and lifting again, each time taking a little more with them. You wonder how long before the same kids end up at that doorway, before someone forces the jug into their hands. There's a bitter kind of irony in the thought in your time. You can order antibiotics to your door without leaving the couch. Here, the miracle is a handful of weeds steeped in cheap rum. And maybe, just maybe, the weeds are the safer bet. Would you drink it or gamble on the fever, which would be faster? Past the apothecary. Two men stand by the hitching post, arguing over whether the illness comes from the fish or the cold. One says it's God thinning the ranks. The other says it's the magistrate's fault for selling too much salt upriver and leaving the town's barrels bare. You keep walking, not sure which explanation you'd rather believe. The houses lean in overhead, their roofs heavy with frost. Windows are shuttered tight against the wind. In the eaves above one, you see the tail of a gull sticking out, twitching once, twice then still. Even the scavengers are dying. You pause in the middle of the road. The smell is still with you, wound into the wool of your coat, the weave of your scarf. You picture weeks from now, catching it again in some far-off place and being pulled straight back to this street, this air, this moment, somewhere behind you. The rat you saw earlier scrabbles through the slush, heading for the shore. You wonder if it's going for food or just away from here, and if it knows the difference. The town hall smells like every other building lately: cold wood, damp wool, and a thread of salt that never leaves. You stand near the back, shoulders brushing the rough boards of the wall, trying to keep clear of the draft that seeps under the door. The benches are already filled. People hunch together, voices low until the magistrate raps his cane on the floor. The meeting opens with a prayer. Eyes stay closed longer than the words last, as if the silence after amen might work better than anything spoken. Then the arguing begins. "It's the weather," says a broad man in a fraying coat, rising from the first bench. "The bay's been odd before, this time's worse." "Aye, but it's the Lord's hand, not ours." Across the aisle, a thin woman with a red kerchief shakes her head. "And what of the barrel?" she calls. "Salt's dearer than silver this winter." You think that the Lord's doing a murmur ripples through the room. You hear your own name in a whisper, though you're not sure why, maybe just because you've been seen on the docks, near the empty flats, near the bones. The magistrate lifts a hand for quiet. "Well, keep to the matter. Causes, not accusations. But the causes sound like accusations anyway. On one side, weather, currents, an unlucky season. On the other, men in warm houses counting coins while the rest of the town counts fish heads. You catch a detail in the Noiser name spoken low, almost buried. The East Bay Company. It's not an unfamiliar name. They have their hands in every dockside warehouse. But here, in the context of hunger, it feels heavier. Someone in the back stands. You know him by sight, a shipwright's apprentice. "I've seen the stores," he says, casks stacked to the rafters, all marked for the company, not for us. Headed upriver on the next thaw. The broad man laughs, though it sounds forced. "Then you've seen wrong. No one would move stock when the harbours froze." "Wouldn't they?" The apprentice shoots back. "Not even if the price is thrice the old," that draws a sharper murmur, and a few glances toward the magistrate, who smooths his coat without meeting anyone's eyes. You notice his hand twitch at his cuff, like he's checking for something hidden there. The debate turns, weather against greed, providence against policy. Someone mentions a storm 2 decades past, when ice locked the harbour for 6 weeks. Another talks about the year the cod schools vanished after a red tide. Then the kerchiefed woman speaks again, and in those years was the salt sold away while we chewed on dried eel. No one answers right away. You feel the heat in the room. Not from any fire, it's just bodies, breath, words sharpening in the air. You think of the smell in the apothecary, the coughing woman outside, the children stacking fish bones on the flats. It's easier to blame weather than faces, you know. Weather doesn't walk into church beside you. The magistrate finally says, "We will investigate the matter of the company's stores. In the meantime, we prepare for the spring catch." A voice near you mutters, "If there is one." The meeting moves on to talk of rationing, repairs to the pier, whether to send a party inland for grain. But the earlier words keep circling in your mind. The name of the company like a knot you can't work loose. In colonial towns, monopolies like the East Bay Company could starve a port without lifting a sword. They owned the ships, the salt, the routes. Sometimes they did it by accident, poor timing, bad weather. Sometimes not. Historians still argue which was which. The benches scrape as people rise to leave. Outside, the air feels sharper, cleaner, though you know it's the same salt rot you've been breathing for weeks. The crowd disperses into alleys and lanes, voices low now, shoulders hunched against the wind. You linger by the doorway, watching the magistrate speak in low tones to two men you've never seen before. Their coats are too fine for this town. One carries a ledger bound in leather, edges darkened with use. You can't hear their words, but you see the magistrate nod, quick and shallow, before slipping them through the side door. What would you bet that ledger lists the weather, or the barrels? The thought follows you down the lane, past the shuttered shops and the empty fish racks swaying in the wind. You pass the church, its bell quiet for once, and you almost miss the sound. Almost. When you reach the wharf, the tide is still gone. The flats stretch out, pale and hard, scattered with gulls and darker shapes you can't quite name in the dim light. The boards creak under your step, the same tired complaint they've made all season. Somewhere upriver, if the apprentice is right, there's a warehouse stacked to its rafters with what this town needs most. You wonder if the gulls there are fatter. You pull your coat tighter. The wind off the flats tastes like rust. In it, you think you catch the faintest trace of that seaweed and rum smell. Even though the apothecary is far behind you, it makes you think of the meeting hall, of the names spoken and not spoken. It's easier to blame the weather. Weather doesn't take notes in a leather-bound ledger. Weather doesn't count profits in the dark. You leave the wharf before dawn, when the air is cold enough to feel like glass in your throat. The others are already ahead, 4 figures moving along the edge of the frozen flats, their shapes soft in the grey light. You catch up slowly, boots crunching over salt-crusted sand, the tide still nowhere in sight. The gulls are silent at this hour, which somehow makes the emptiness louder. The plan, if you can call it that, is to search for any vessels abandoned down the coast. A storm earlier in the season broke several free from their moorings. Some were seen drifting toward the shallows, hulls listing like drunks in the street. If the ice has pinned one near shore, it might hold what you need: barrels, rope, nails, anything worth more than the nothing you have now. You pass the point where the flats turn to a narrow strip of beach. Here the sand is darker, wet from the trickle of water that still moves under the ice. The wind carries a smell you've learned to read would. Salt, and that faint tang of tar used to seal hulls. Somewhere ahead, there's a boat. It takes another half hour before you see it. A shadow on the pale horizon, low and skewed, as if leaning into the wind. As you draw closer, the details sharpen, the bow is buried in a bank of frozen sand. The stern lifted slightly, exposing ribs of dark wood. The deck lists hard to port, tilted enough that you have to lean to keep your footing when you climb aboard. The boards are slick with frost. Your hand on the rail comes away with splinters and a green smear of algae. The rope coiled near the mast is stiff with salt, its fibres swollen and frayed. You could cut it into lengths, but you'd have to check for rot. The main hatch is half open, wedged by something inside. One of your companions, a man from the next street, overworks it free with the toe of his boot. The wood groans, a long, low sound that seems too alive for the cold. Below deck, the air is close and smells of mould, damp grain, and something metallic. Light from the hatch cuts across the hold, catching on a scatter of broken crates. You see nails spilled like dark seeds on the floor, a cracked barrel hoop, scraps of canvas stiff as boards. In colonial wrecks, salvage was as much about risk as reward. Maritime law was a tangle if a ship was still claimed by its owner. Taking from it could earn you a fine or worse. But if it was truly abandoned, the find was yours, so long as you could carry it away. That so long as is heavier than it sounds in a place where your back is the only transport. You crouch to lift a small cask, the wood swollen with damp. It's lighter than you expect. and when you tilt it, you hear nothing inside. Another barrel near the stern is sealed, but the iron bands are rusted. The man with you prays at them with a spike until one breaks with a snap. The smell that rises is sharp enough to stingfish at oil, gone hard and sour. Useless, he mutters, shoving it aside. On the starboard side, near the rail, a coil of chain lies half buried under canvas. You tug it free, links clanking in a muffled rhythm. It's heavy, but the iron looks sound. You imagine it hanging from your shed roof to hold nets, or stretched across the dock to moor whatever boats are left come spring. Above deck, the others have found a locker wedged near the bow. They drag it into the light, its lid warped. Inside are 3 glass bottles, each clouded with sediment, and a roll of chart paper tied with string. The paper is spotted with mildew, but when unrolled, the ink lines are still visible, coastal routes, neat and deliberate, the kind a trading vessel might keep. Someone says, company ship, and it's not hard to see why. The map is stamped with the East Bay Company crest in one corner. Small compass rose inside a ring. The name feels heavier now, after the meeting in the hall. You wonder if the barrels that were supposed to feed your neighbours ended up on ships like this, bound for ports where the price was higher. You keep the thought to yourself, out here, in the cold, with only a handful of scavenged rope and a coil of chain to show for your work. It's too easy to imagine how far a rumour could travel and what it could cost. The wind rises as you finish, rattling the loose rigging so it claps against the mast in irregular bursts. You pause, listening. For a moment, it sounds almost like applause, slow, sarcastic, as if the ship itself is mocking the effort. On the way back down the coast, the tide has not returned. The flats gleam pale under the low sun, scattered with shapes you don't look at too closely. The chain drags behind you, leaving a wavering line in the sand. Halfway to the wharf, you stop to catch your breath. From here, the abandoned ship is just a sliver against the horizon, tilted forever toward the wind. You imagine it there in another season, the sand burying it a little deeper, the rope fraying to dust, the map curling into unreadable fragments. One of the others asks if you think the company will send someone to claim it. You shrug. If they do, we never saw it. It earns a laugh, but a short one. In this cold, laughter doesn't last, it comes out in a cloud and disappears. By the time you reach the edge of town, your hands are raw from the rope, your coat marked with streaks of salt and rust. The church bell rings once, then again, though you can't tell if it's for time or for warning. The gulls have returned to the flats, their cries sharp against the wind. You keep walking, chain clinking with each step, the map rolled tight in your pocket. What do you think weighs more in this place, a length of iron, or a name stamped in ink? It's the last thing you expect to see in the belly of a half-sunk skiffer barrel that hasn't split open or gone soft from the damp. You almost don't notice it at first, tucked behind a heap of torn sailcloth and a length of chain still wet from the tide. The hoops are intact, though they've bled rust into the staves, leaving orange streaks like dried sap. You wedge your boot against the base and push. The barrel rolls reluctantly, its weight promising something inside. A few grains spill from a seam near the top, pale against the dark planks. Salt. The others gather close. In this winter, salt is as good as coin. It keeps meat edible, hides pliable, fish marketable. In some colonies, it was wages more reliable than paper or promises. Soldiers could be paid in it. Labourers, too. The word salary still carries that ghost. Someone says, that's worth more than the boat. And maybe it is. You work the lid loose with a marlinspike. The seal breaks with a sound like wet paper tearing. At first, all you see is white grainy, dull in the low light. Then the shadows sharpen, and you realise it's not all salt. There's grit mixed through it. Darker flecks that shift when the barrel tips. You reach in, fingers sifting through the crystals. The grit is coarse sand, cold and dry. Your fingertips catch on something harder. You pull it free, a shard of bone, thin and curved. The others lean in. It's small enough to be from a fish, but the jagged end looks wrong, splintered. You find another, then another, until you have a handful. Some still carry the faint smell of rot, muted by the salt but not erased. The man beside you mutters, they didn't clean it. Just scoop the shore into a barrel. You imagine it the flats after the fish kill. Someone shoveling the top layer wholesale into the cask. Salt, sand, bone, all tumbled together. It's still salt, yes, but it's fouled, diluted. To eat it would be to eat the memory of the rot, every grain carrying a trace. One of the younger men says you could sift it. Another says you could sell it upriver if you keep your mouth shut. The older man from your street just shakes his head. Nobody pays full weight for lies. You know that's not true. Plenty of people will, if they never hear the lie. The barrel is rolled out onto the deck. The sun catches on the crystals clinging to your gloves, making them glint like frost. It should feel like a victory finding this much salt in one place. Instead, it feels like carrying a rumour in solid form. Back on shore, you set the barrel down in the lee of a shed. Someone suggests stashing it until you decide. Someone else says to split it now. The talk circles, no one wanting to be the first to make the choice. In your mind, the East Bay Company stamp from the ship's chart presses itself over the image of the barrel. If the ship was theirs, maybe the salt was too. Maybe this isn't just salvage. Maybe it's theft, and maybe that doesn't matter anymore. Colonial records tell stories of cut salt mixed with sand to add weight, with gypsum to whiten, even with ash to disguise age. Buyers learn to taste before paying. Sellers learn to hide the worst until after the deal. Everyone learned not to ask too many questions. You find yourself wondering which is worse, that the barrel was filled this way at the start, or that someone doctored it after the fish kill. One is greed, the other desperation. Both leave the same taste. A boy passes, glancing at the barrel like he's seen it before. You ask him what he's staring at. He shrugs. Looks like the ones they load on the company carts. The older man hears it too. His mouth tightens, but he says nothing. The wind picks up, carrying the smell of the flats into town. It mingles with the sharper scent of the salt, creating something metallic on your tongue. You lick your lips and regret it instantly. One of the younger men grabs a pinch from the open lid and rubs it between his fingers. Still works, he says, as if the ability to draw moisture from meat is all that matters. Maybe he's right. Maybe you've all gotten soft enough to care about things like taste. But you can't stop looking at the bone shards lying on the deck beside the barrel. They're too light to matter, too small to keep. Still, they feel like proof of neglect, of carelessness, of something no one wants to name out loud. A cart rumbles past, its wheels crunching over frozen ruts. Two men in heavy coats ride it, the company crest stitched on the back in pale thread. They don't look at you, don't slow down, but you feel their presence like a shadow crossing the street. When they're gone, the group goes quiet. The younger man drops the pinch of salt back into the barrel. No one suggests selling it again. You help roll it into the shed. The boards groan under the weight. In the dim, the salt loses its glint, becoming just another pale shape in a winter full of them. As you close the door, you think about the soldiers paid in salt, about wages you could eat if you were careful, about the way value changes when your belly's empty. You think about how quickly people learn to take what's offered, no matter how it's been cut. Outside, the wind shifts again, somewhere down the street. The church bell tolls once, then twice. You can tell if it's marking time or marking trouble. Your gloves are still dusted white. You brush them together, but the crystals cling, catching in the seams, refusing to let go. What would you rather have in your hands? A handful of clean salt, or the truth about where it came from? By the time you're far enough from town to stop looking over your shoulder, the sun is already leaning hard into the horizon. You and the others find a hollow just beyond a low ridge, where the wind slips overhead instead of straight into your bones. The ground is frozen in patches, softer where old grass lies matted under a thin skin of frost. No one says much as camp takes shape. You've all been on your feet since before dawn scavenging, hauling, hiding what you found. The barrel in the shed might as well be here beside you. It's in every silence. One of the men gathers driftwood from the strand. Another shakes loose a bundle of dried kelp from his pack, the leaves rattling like old paper. The smell is sharp, clean in its own way, until the fire takes it. Then it turns to something richer. Salt and smoke twined together. It stirs the back of your tongue, makes you think of smoked fish and winter feasts, though there's nothing like that here. When the flames settle into a low, steady crackle, you stretch your hands toward them. The heat comes in pulses, a relief you can feel in your knuckles. Sparks drift up and wink out against the dark. Beyond the ridge, You hear the slow hush of the tide working its way back in. It's not close enough to see, but its rhythm is there, a reminder the sea hasn't abandoned you completely. Not yet. Someone passes you a strip of dried eel. It's chewy, almost leathery, with a mineral tang that clings to your teeth. The salt on it blooms as you bite, stinging the cracks in your lips. You lick at the taste without thinking, catching a trace of ash from the kelp fire. The talk, when it comes, is low and scattered. Someone mentioned seeing lights out on the water last week, lanterns moving in a slow line toward the mouth of the bay. A fishing party, maybe, or a company vessel slipping past in the dark. No one agrees, and no one pushes it. In the pause, the fire becomes the only voice, the pop of sap, the sigh of the kelp burning down to embers. You watch the leaves curl inward as they blacken, their edges glowing for a heartbeat before they vanish into ash. It's mesmerizing, the way things can burn so quietly. In colonial camps, fires like this were as much signal as comfort. Light meant safety from the dark and the things that hunted in it. But it also meant visibility to neighbors, to strangers, to anyone who might want what you had. You can't help thinking about that as the flames rise and fall, throwing shadows across the faces around you. One of the younger men tilts his head back, eyes half closed. Feels like we could be anywhere, he says. Any time. He's not wrong. The firelight flattens the years. It could be 100 years ago, 100 ahead, and the smell of smoke on wool would be the same. You lean back on your hands, feeling the cold seep up through your palms from the ground. Above, the sky is cleared to a deep, brittle blue. Stars edge into view, one after another, until they're thick enough to map. You can't remember the last time you looked at them without the roofs of town in the way. The man with the eel offers another piece. You shake your head, still working the salt from the first. He shrugs and chews in silence. Across the fire, someone hums a tune of no words, just a line repeated under their breath. It's not cheerful, but it's steady, the kind of sound you can set your breathing to. You let your gaze drift past the flames to the edge of the ridge. In the faint light, the grass there moves like water, bending and straightening in the wind. It almost makes you forget the rest, the cold, the hunger, the bone-coloured shards in the barrel. For a while, no one speaks. The waves fill the gap, slow and patient. You imagine them pressing against the shore like a heartbeat, the pull and release as constant as your own breath. Then someone says, "When we get back, do we tell anyone?" No one asks what he means. The question hangs in the smoke. You taste it on the back of your tongue, bitter now. You think of the ledger you didn't see but know exists, of the crest stamped on the ship's chart, of the bone in your hand from the barrel. You think of the people in town who wouldn't care where the salt came from if it meant their meat kept another week. "I guess it depends who you mean by anyone," you say. That gets a few quiet laughs, though none of them sound amused. The fire burns lower, the kelp collapsing into a bed of red coals. You pull your coat tighter, but the heat is enough to keep your hands bare a little longer. The eel taste has faded, replaced by the clean bite of the night air. The salt is still there, though on your lips, on your skin, in the smoke you've been breathing for hours. It's always there. A stray gust pushes the smoke sideways, carrying the smell toward the ridge. For a moment, it's as if the sea itself has climbed up to sit beside you, its breath mixing with the fires. You close your eyes and let it wash over you, not caring if it smells of rot or clean tide water. It's familiar, and that's enough. From somewhere down the coast comes the faint sound of a bell, not the church's deep toll, but a smaller, sharper ring, like a buoy shifting in the tide. You wonder if it's real, or if you've just been listening for it too long. No one moves to bank the fire. The cold will wake you before it dies entirely, and maybe that's the point. You stretch your legs toward the heat, feeling the warmth seep into your boots. The stars overhead are steady now, the constellations fixed where you remember them from other winters. You catch yourself thinking, just for a breath, that this here, now might be enough to carry you through another day. Then the wind shifts again, and you smell the kelp burning down to nothing. And you remember there's a barrel waiting in the dark back home. The coals pulse once, twice, like the last words of a conversation. You let the quiet take hold, The morning starts with a crackle of frost underfoot and a bite in the air that slides straight into your lungs. You kick dirt over the coals from last night's fire, watching the last red glow vanish under a thin crust of grey. Ahead, the land dips into a stretch of marsh that you've been pretending wouldn't be there when you woke up. It's not water in the usual sense, more a mosaic of shallow pools rimmed with salt crystals, stitched together by narrow ridges of mud. The wind carries the smell of it long before you step in briny, stale, with that faint sulphur edge you remember from overturned clams on the flats. You follow the first man in, picking your way along the firmer strips, but there's no real dry path. The leather of your boots darkens almost immediately, the cold seeping through like a slow leak in a roof. Each step sends a ribbon of muddy water curling away, leaving a film of grit on the surface. By the time you're halfway, the leather feels less like leather and more like a damp rag wrapped around your feet. You can already tell the stitching along the sides is losing the fight. Your toes throb with each push forward, trapped between the bite of the cold and the rub of the seam. "Good day for the beach," someone behind you says, voice thick with sarcasm. You glance over your shoulder and grin despite yourself. "Should have worn the good sneakers," you say. That gets a short laugh, though it dies quick. Most of them have no idea what sneakers are, and you're not about to explain rubber soles and waterproof membranes to people who think waxed canvas is modern luxury. A patch of ground gives way under your weight, sinking you to mid-calf in a mix of silt and water cold enough to sting bone. You pull free with a wet sucking sound, nearly losing the boot. A slick of salt slime clings to the leather, smelling sharper now that it's warmed by your skin. In colonial days, this kind of crossing was just another part of travel. There were no paved roads through marshland, only narrow causeways that vanished with the tide or sagged under too much rain. People accepted that their feet would be wet for days, that blisters would form and break and form again. You try to imagine explaining moisture-wicking socks to them, the way a modern hiker might swear by gear you could never dream of here. The man ahead stops to scrape mud from his heel with a stick. The skin above his boot is already raw, a thin stripe of red against the pale cold. You don't bother checking your own. You can feel the blisters forming, little pockets of heat in all that chill. The wind shifts, carrying the sound of water lapping against something hollow, maybe a half-buried cask or a log trapped in the shallows. You can't see it through the reeds, but the rhythm is steady, almost like breathing. It's oddly comforting, until you remember what might be inside the cask if it's from one of the company ships. You shift to a narrower ridge, the mud firmer here, but it runs out after 10 paces and you're back in the water. A crust of salt breaks under your step, the shards scraping against the leather. They leave faint white lines, like frost etching itself into the boot. Your mind drifts to the absurdity of it, how, centuries from now, people will pay extra for shoes that look distressed, boots with scuffs and marks baked in at the factory. You imagine some future kid unboxing a brand new pair that's been made to look like they've walked this same marsh. Never knowing the real thing feels nothing like fashion. A gust cuts across the marsh, flattening the reeds and tossing a spray of fine salt against your cheek. You lick your lips without thinking. The taste is immediate, sharper than last night's eel, and it stays as you wade on. Halfway to the other side, the ground slopes deeper. The water reaches high enough that each step sends a chill up your spine. Your calves cramp from the cold. Your arches ache from gripping inside the boots to keep from sliding. The blisters are past pain now. They've gone to a kind of numb burn that you know will hurt worse when the feeling comes back. Someone slips ahead of you, going down to one knee. The splash sends a sheet of brown water over your shins, soaking through whatever dry was left. He curses, pulls himself upright, and keeps going without looking back. There's nothing to do but move forward. Stopping only makes the cold settle deeper. Near the far edge, the ground firms again. You step onto a rise of coarse sand, dotted with patches of frost. The boots feel heavier than when you started, the leather sagging at the seams. You know that once you stop, they'll stiffen as they dry, and pulling them off will be its own kind of battle. You stamp your feet to shake loose some of the clinging muck, but most of it stays, packed into every crease. The zolt will eat at the stitching if you don't clean it soon, not that there's much chance of that before nightfall. Looking back, the marsh stretches flat and grey, the narrow ridges like faded scars across its surface. The others are still making their way, small figures against the expanse. You feel the wind on your face, sharper now that you're out of the water, and it carries the faintest smell of smoke from somewhere ahead. You roll your shoulders, shifting the weight of your pack. The blisters will break tonight, maybe in your sleep, maybe when you peel off the socks. Either way, the salt will find them, and it will burn. You almost smile at the thought, not because it's funny, but because it's inevitable, like the tide or the wind or the way the company's name keeps finding you. When the last man steps onto the rise, he blows into his hands and says, "Better than swimming." No one answers. The marsh behind you says enough, its surface already closing over the holes you left, erasing the fact you were ever there. You start walking again, the sand underfoot crunching with a mix of frost and salt. Each step leaves a shallow print that the wind begins to blur before you've gone 3 paces. You wonder how far you'd have to go before the taste of the marsh leaves your mouth, or if it ever really does. It starts as a shiver in the air, barely a ripple in the grass, a shift in the light, the kind of thing you might ignore if you weren't already cold to your bones. Then the wind finds the mast. You hear it before you feel it, a low hum that climbs into a whistle, then into something sharper, teeth on glass. The rope still tied there thrums against the wood, each gust plucking it like a string. The sound is steady at first, then fractured, the wind coming in sudden bursts that make the rigging shudder. By the time you reach the edge of the cove, the sky has begun to fade not to evening, but to white. The horizon dissolves. The line between water, land, and air blurs until it's all the same pale emptiness. It's snow, though the flakes aren't falling straight. They're driven sideways, spinning in tight spirals before slamming into your coat. The first sting is almost pleasant, a change from the damp chill that's been riding you for days. Then the cold digs in, sharp enough to make you blink. The snow finds the gap between your scarf and your collar, sliding icy fingers down the back of your neck. Someone shouts ahead of you, but the wind swallows the words. You see their arm point toward the boat you were using as a marker, the one anchored in the shallows beyond the ridge. It's rocking harder now, the boat swinging against the pull of the anchor line. You move faster, boots slipping on the frozen sand. The wind shoves at your side, not a steady push but a series of lunges that nearly knock you off balance. Each step forward feels like leaning into a door that someone's trying to slam shut in your face. By the time you reach the ridge, the gusts are hard enough to steal your breath. You duck your head, squinting into the white. The mast looms suddenly, close enough that you see the ice feathering along the grain of the wood. The rigging is a messline's tangled and snapping in the wind. Sails still half-lashed from the last time anyone tried to work them. You put a hand to the mast for balance. It's colder than the air, the frost biting through your glove. A gust catches you full in the chest, and for a moment your boots slide on the ice-slick deck. Your knees lock, fighting the instinct to grab for something that might give way. The others are shouting again short, sharp bursts of sound between the gusts. One man struggles with the anchor line, trying to bring the boat closer to shore before the wind turns it broadside. Another is half-crouched at the hatch, securing it against the spray that's starting to freeze as it lands. You join the anchor line, your hands closing on the rope. It's stiff, each fibre swollen with ice, but it still burns your palms when it slips. Together you heave, timing your pulls with the roll of the boat. The wind howls through the gap between mast and sail, a thin, rising scream that makes your teeth ache. The sky is fully gone now, no colour, no shape, just the press of the snow around you. The flakes cling to your lashes, melting just enough to blur your vision before freezing again. You keep your head down, counting the rhythm of the rope in your hands. Colonial sailors called this white weather when you can't tell sea from sky, when the horizon vanishes and distance becomes guesswork. It's the kind of storm that swallows whole ships without ever capsizing them, carrying them blind into rocks or ice. Here, on a boat you can still walk to at low tide, it feels just as capable of swallowing you. A gust slams into the mast hard enough to make it groan. You imagine the sound as a kind of warning, the wood telling you it's close to its limit. The man at the hatch shouts something you can't catch, but his urgency carries over the wind. Your fingers have gone past pain to a deep, dull throb. You can't feel the rope anymore except as a shape, the ridges pressing into your skin. The snow is piling now, thin drifts forming in the lee of the deck. Your boots crunch through it, wetness seeping into the seams that never dried from the marsh crossing. The line finally gives, the boat swinging a few feet closer to shore. It's not much, but it's enough to ease the strain on the mast. You brace yourself against the rail, breathing hard, and realize your breath is visible even in the gaps between gusts. Each exhale is ripped away before you can feel it on your face. A lull comes in seconds, maybe less, when the wind drops enough that you hear the creak of the hull and the slap of small waves against the side. The quiet is almost worse. It feels like the storm is drawing breath. You look toward the shore and see only a shifting wall of white. Then it hits again. The gust shoves you into the mast, hard enough that your shoulder protests. Snow bursts across the deck, a scatter of fine crystals that sting your cheeks and find the gap at your wrist. You swear and grip the rail, knuckles pale under your gloves. Some part of you is afraid, and not in the abstract. It's the fear that lives in the body, cold in the gut, heat in the chest, that makes your arms and legs want to move even when there's nowhere to go. You shove it down because you have to. Fear doesn't keep the mast standing. Another pull on the anchor line, another gust, another moment of the world reduced to the rope in your hands and the burn in your lungs. Your eyes water, the tears freezing at the corners. You can't tell if the shudder in your arms is from effort or cold. The man beside you laughs suddenly, a short, incredulous bark that's immediately lost to the wind. You glance at him, and he's grinning like a man who knows the joke isn't funny but needs to tell it anyway. "Good day for a sail," he shouts. You shake your head, and it almost feels normal for half a second. When the worst of it passes, if you can call this less, it's only because your body's adjusted, not because the storm has eased. The mast still moans under the gusts. The deck still shivers with each hit, but you can see the ridge again, a smear of darker grey against the white. You coil the anchor line as best you can with stiff fingers, tucking it where it won't whip free. Your shoulders ache, your legs feel heavy from bracing, the snow keeps coming, but you've made it through the first wave. On shore, the world is no less white, but the ground doesn't move under you. You stamp your boots, sending little explosions of slush onto the frozen sand. Your skin prickles as blood starts to return to your fingers. The smell of the sea is muted by the cold, replaced by the clean, metallic scent of snow. You look back at the boat, its mast still swaying slightly, the rigging snapping in the wind. It's smaller now, just another dark shape in the blur of the storm. Fear hasn't left, but it's settled into something else. Resolve, maybe. You keep moving because stopping feels like inviting the cold to finish what it started. What's worse in a storm like this, the white you can't see through, or the silence when it's gone? The storm leaves behind a world scoured clean, or maybe just stripped bare. The snow is still falling, but now it's the soft kind, flakes tumbling straight down, catching in the ridges of your coat. The wind has gone somewhere else. You walk without leaning into it for the first time in hours, and the sudden absence of its push feels almost unnatural. The path inland is half buried, but you follow the line of stunted pines until the roofs appear low, pitched, some sagging under the weight of ice. The cabins are arranged in a rough horseshoe, their doors facing inward toward a central clearing. No footprints mark the snow between them. The first door you try is latched but not locked. The wood swells against the frame before giving way. Inside, the air is stale, the kind of stillness that holds its own temperature. It smells faintly of leather, old smoke, and something sharper salt, though you can't see any yet. The cabin's single window is rimmed with frost, letting in a thin, grey light that falls across the table in the centre. The surface is covered in a fine layer of crystals. You run a gloved finger through it and taste without thinking. Salt, not clean. Sharp grains like you'd scatter over food, but dull, slightly damp. It leaves a trace of grit on your tongue. Around the table, 3 chairs stand pushed back as if someone rose quickly. A 4th is on its side, one leg splintered. On the far wall, a rack still holds 2 rifles, their barrels dusted white like the table. A pair of boots sits neatly beneath, their leather stiff and pale with frost. You take a step and your boot heel clicks against something metal. Looking down, you see the jaws of a bear trap, its teeth half hidden under a crust of salt. The spring is still set. You crouch to look closer, noting the fine lines of rust along the hinges. It's been here a while, but not long enough to be forgotten. Outside, the snow muffles everything, even your own steps. You check the other cabins, most of the same cot still made with thin wool blankets, hooks holding parkas and hats. shelves stocked with jars clouded by frost. In one, a tin plate rests beside a spoon on a counter, the remains of something hardened to a dark crust at the edges. No sign of struggle, no sign of packing, either. In colonial hunting camps, it wasn't uncommon for men to leave in a hurry, weather turning, ice breaking up, game moving to another range. But usually, someone came back for the gear, the tools, the things too valuable to abandon. Here, it feels like no one meant to return. You find more salt in a small storeroom bag stacked neatly against the wall, each open at the top. The grains spill over the edges in little drifts, clinging to the floorboards. Mixed in are flecks of something darker, like dried blood. You think of the fouled barrel in the shed back in town and feel your jaw tighten. At the far end of the camp, a larger cabin stands apart. Its door hangs crooked, one hinge bent. Inside, the light is dimmer, the single window obscured by a curtain stiff with frost. The room is warmer, though, faintly, as if it's been holding heat longer than it should. Here, the table is set for a meal plates laid out, tin cups upright, a small pot in the centre, dust coats everything, but not enough to hide the details, the curve of a half-filled cup, the dark smear on a fork's tines, the crust of bread left half-bitten. A chair here is pushed back farther than the others, angled toward the door. You move to the hearth. Ash sits cold in the grate, but the logs are stacked as if ready to be lit again. A single match rests on the mantel, its head dulled by moisture. In the corner, another bear trap lies open, its teeth wide. A strip of hide is still caught in the hinge animal, by the look of it, though the salt has leached the colour away. The silence here is so complete you can hear the faint patter of flakes against the window, the shift of your own coat when you breathe. You stand still for a long moment, letting the quiet press against your ears. It's not the peace of safety, it's the weight of absence, the kind that comes when a place remembers something it isn't telling you. The others have wandered into separate cabins, calling to each other in low voices. You hear someone open a chest, the muffled thump of boots on a floor above. Then, from somewhere across the clearing, a shout short, sharp, cut off as quickly as it began. You step into the cold, your breath curling up in the air. The snow is lighter now, the sky lifting enough to show the dark fringe of the forest beyond the camp. No movement there, but the trees feel closer than they should. The man who shouted stands outside one of the smaller cabins, a length of rope in his hands. It's stiff with salt, coiled neatly, the ends frayed. "Found this under the bed," he says. His voice is flat, but his eyes are fixed on the tree line. You take the rope, feeling the grit between the fibres. Salt for preservation, maybe, or for weight. You've seen similar ropes used to haul meat or secure traps. The question of why it was hidden lingers unsaid. Back in the larger cabin, you brush the salt from a chair and sit. The wood is cold through your coat, but you stay anyway, staring at the plates on the table. You picture the hunters sitting here, their voices filling the room, the scrape of knives on tin. You imagine one looking up at the door, hearing something outside, something that made them all rise and not come back. You felt fear in storms, in the marsh, in the long dark walks back to town. This is different. This is the kind of unease that doesn't quicken your pulse but slows it, makes every sound feel too loud. You breathe carefully, as if the air itself might shatter. Outside, the others begin to gather, stamping their feet for warmth. No one suggests staying here. The camp offers shelter, but not comfort. You take one last look around before stepping out, the salt dust on the table catching the dim light. For a moment, it looks like frost again, harmless. You know better. The clearing is still empty when you close the door, the snow already softening your footprints. The bear traps remain where they are, teeth open, waiting. What's worse, the things that leave a place empty, or the things that wait for it to be filled again. It rained in the night. Not the soft kind that taps politely on the roof and leaves you drowsy. It came hard, a steady pounding that found every gap in the shingles and every loose seam in the walls. You woke once to hear it roaring on the cabins, then again to notice the quiet when it finally stopped. By morning, the camp feels smaller, hunched against the grey. The roofs are darker with water, their edges dripping slow and steady. The air has that washed clean smell, sharp with the scent of salt and wet earth. Your boots sink slightly in the thaw-soft ground as you step outside, each move accompanied by the faint suction of mud. Two men stand in the clearing, not speaking. Their heads are bent toward the ground between them. You follow their gaze. Boot prints. They're fresh, pressed deep into the wet earth. The ridges still crisp. One set. The toes point toward the break in the pines that leads to the coast. You know who didn't get up this morning. No one says the name. You count the prints, each step an arm's length apart, deliberate. Whoever left them wasn't in a hurry. The group starts to follow. No one talks. The only sounds are the creak of wet leather and the slow sigh of the wind moving through the pines. You keep your eyes on the ground, tracing the path as it winds past the cabins and into the tree line. Beyond the trees, the world opens. The rain has flattened the dunes, smoothing them into long, dark slopes streaked with rivulets. The prints here are even clearer, the wet sand holding each tread like it's been cast in plaster. You glance back once. The cabins are already half hidden by the trees. The man walking behind you catches your eye but doesn't speak. You can read the same question in his face, why alone? The smell of the ocean rises ahead, stronger now salt and kelp, with a metallic edge like wet iron. The steady hiss of the tide is threaded with the deeper rumble of waves hitting something solid. At the top of the last dune, you stop. The prints run straight down toward the water, not wavering, not looping back. The tide is low, the wet sand shining like slate under the clouded light. Pools have formed where the waves left them, each holding a piece of the sky. The prints cross the flat, each step clean until they reach the waterline. There, they end. No scuff marks, no sideways turn, just the last heel mark with a faint crescent where the toe would have been, blurred by the first reach of foam. Someone behind you says, maybe they went along the shore. You split from the group, walking a dozen paces in each direction, scanning for an angle, a drag, anything, nothing. The sand is smooth beyond the final print, the sea already pulling away what little shape was left. You stand there a long time, the wind pushing at your back, cold enough to slide under your coat and settle between your shoulder blades. It's the kind of chill that isn't just temperature, it's weight. In the colonial records, there are stories like this: hunters, fishermen, even whole families who vanished overnight, leaving only a trail to the shore. Some say they felt a sudden fog, losing the land and walking into the tide. Others whisper about debts, or ships that waited offshore, or voices carried on the wind. No one ever seemed certain, and the sea never answered. You kneel at the last print, pressing your gloved fingers into the damp sand beside it. The water seeps up, darkening the leather. You imagine the moment, the cold climbing past the knees, the hips, the chest, the shock giving way to numbness, the pull of the current just strong enough to make turning back feel impossible. The wind shifts, bringing a spray of salt from some distant wave. It lands on your lips, sharp against the dull taste of morning. You lick it away, and it's just salt ordinary. Absolute. The same on a fish skin, on the rim of a barrel, on the tears that haven't fallen yet. Someone calls your name from up the beach. You straighten and see the others grouped at the dune's base. One gestures toward the sky, where the clouds are beginning to split, thin ribbons of light showing through. You glance back at the waterline. The last print is already softening, the edges collapsing. By the time the tide returns, it will be gone. The walk back feels longer. The prints you're following now, the ones leading inland, look different, smaller somehow, as if the act of knowing where they end changes the shape of the path. When the cabins come into view again, the emptiness inside them feels sharper. You step into the one you shared with the missing man. His cot is bare except for the folded blanket at its foot. No pack, no note, just space where a body should be. Later, you sit by the cold hearth, the smell of damp wood heavy in the air. Someone passes outside, their boots thudding softly on the wet ground. The sound fades quickly, swallowed by the quiet. That night, you dream of the beach, of walking down the dune, feeling the sand soften underfoot, the hiss of water over stone. You wake with the taste of salt in your mouth and the image of the last print burned into your mind. It's strange. You think, how quickly the sea forgets. It starts with a sound you almost mistake for the windlong, low, carrying just enough tremble to lift the hairs at the back of your neck. But the wind doesn't rise and fall like that. The first howl is answered before you can decide whether you imagined it. This one is closer, threaded with something sharper, urgent. You pause with one hand on the latch of the storeroom door, eyes shifting toward the tree line. The pines are still black shapes in the grey light, but they feel nearer than they were a moment ago. Someone steps out from the cabin across the clearing, head tilted, listening. The howl comes again, from a different angle this time. Another joins it, then another. The sound is in your chest now, resonating in your ribs like the strike of a drum. The storeroom smells of brine and smoke. You know without looking that the barrels of meat are still there, their salted skins holding a scent sharp enough to carry for miles. You think of the open rope coils, the fouled salt back in town, the way the company marked its goods as if the mark itself could keep hands and teeth off them. A voice from the far cabin says, "They smell it." It's not a question. You remember a note from an old ledger colonial accounts of wolves in hard winters, circling settlements for days until a mistake brought them in. It wasn't the people they wanted, at least not at first. It was the stores. Another howl rakes the air. This one's so close you can feel it in the soles of your feet. The clearing seems smaller now. You look toward the edge of the trees and catch the barest flicker of movement low. Quick, gone again. The man nearest the storeroom glances at you, then at the door. "We should move it," he says. You shake your head. Moving the barrels now would mean carrying them into the open, their scent spilling farther, the noise of boots and wood carrying into the forest. The first shape appears between two peens of shadow against shadow, then the glint of an eye catching the dim light. Another steps into view a dozen paces away. Their bodies are lean, legs long, coats mottled with frost. Their breath drifts in short clouds, each one vanishing into the cold. One steps forward, head low, ears flat. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need to. The others fan out, barely making a sound on the damp earth. You've been close to dogs before, even the big ones that guard property in port towns. But wolves are different. There's no wag in them, no sideways glance for permission. They're built for this, closing the space between hunger and its answer. From somewhere deep in the tree line comes a sound that isn't a howl but a yip, sharp and quick. The nearest wolf freezes, ears flicking toward it. You follow its gaze and see two more shapes slipping along the far edge of the clearing. Up, someone says. You don't argue. The nearest cabin has a roof low enough to reach by hauling onto the porch rail, then bracing a boot against the window frame. Your gloves slip once on the frost-slick wood, but you get there. From above, the clearing looks different, flatter, the footprints and drag marks from the last few days etched into the ground like a map you can't quite read. The wolves circle now, slow, their eyes catching the light in brief, eerie flashes. One stops near the centre, nose lifting toward the storeroom. The wind shifts, carrying the smell of brine and fat in a wave that even you can taste from here. They know. They've known since the first howl. Colonial hunters wrote about this too, how wolves in winter learn to match their movements to the wind, approaching only when the scent blew their way, retreating when it shifted. It wasn't instinct alone, it was patience. The man beside you on the roof mutters, "They'll wait." He doesn't say for what. You imagine the barrels split open, the meat dragged into the tree line, the wolves gone before you could even decide to follow. You imagine the empty storeroom, the smell of salt and blood lingering in the boards. The wolf nearest the storeroom takes a step forward. Its paws leave no sound, but you can see the muscles in its shoulders shift under the fur. Another mirrors the movement from the opposite side, and the air feels tight, as if the clearing itself is holding its breath. Then nothing happens. They stop. All of them. One by one, the heads lift, ears turning towards something beyond your hearing. The silence is worse than the howls. For a moment, you think they'll leave. A few take steps backward, fading into the tree line. But the one nearest the storeroom stays, its gaze fixed on the door. It sits, tail curling around its feet, like it has all the time in the world. The wind shifts again. The smell of meat wraps around you, thick enough to taste. The wolf's mouth parts, tongue flashing over its teeth. Your hand tightens on the roof beam. If they rush, there's no time to get everyone up here. The storeroom is too far to reach before they do. You picture the latch splintering, the barrels cracking, the clearing turning red and white. Another yip from the trees. The seated wolf rises. The others appear again, slipping from shadow to shadow until they form a loose line at the clearing's edge. Their eyes catch the light once more, a final shimmer before they turn away. No one moves until the last tail vanishes into the dark. The clearing feels wrong without them. Too open, too quiet. You climb down slowly, boots hitting the porch with a muted thump. The storeroom door is still shut, the latch still set. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of brine. You press your palm to the nearest barrel and feel the cold of the salt through the wood. You know it's not over. They'll be back. Hunger waits. You step outside, scanning the tree line. The wind has shifted again, carrying the scent away from camp. The pines stand still, their black shapes unmoving. Somewhere out there, a dozen lungs are drawing in the same air, a dozen ears pricked for the change that will bring them back. The man from the roof stands beside you. They'll wait for dark, he says. You both know it's not a warning, it's a promise. And as the light fades, you think not for the first time how thin the line is between keeping what you have and feeding something else's hunger. The clearing is different in the morning, not safer, just different. The wind is low, the kind that lifts smoke without tearing it apart. The fire you left smouldering through the night is still alive, its heart glowing under a crust of grey ash. When you stir it, the coals breathe in, then out, sending a thin column of smoke straight up into the pale sky. The smell hits first burned fur, fat, wet earth, and beneath it, the faint iodine tang that says the tide is on the move. The sea is close enough to hear today, though its voice is quieter than the wolves had been. It's more like someone breathing through the walls. The bodies lie where they fell, crusted with frost. In daylight, they look smaller, but you know that's a trick of the eyes. A dead wolf isn't less wolf, it's just not moving. You and the others move slow, not out of fear, but out of something close to reverence. No one here likes killing what doesn't speak their language. But winter makes the rules, and the rules don't care how you feel about them. You work the first hide loose with the point of a knife, sliding steel between skin and muscle. The sound is soft, almost polite. Steam rises from where the blade parts the flesh, twisting into the air before the wind can decide what to do with it. You catch a wisp on your cheek warm for a heartbeat, then gone. The fire snaps behind you. Someone tosses a length of kelp-damp driftwood onto it, and the smoke shifts from grey to a rich, briny blue. It curls around your shoulders, slips between your fingers, then drifts toward the open slope. The fog is rolling in from the sea-thick low and slow-moving. It pushes into the clearing like a guest who doesn't wait to be invited. The smoke meets it halfway, folding into the mist until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. From a distance, you imagine it would look like the camp itself is dissolving, piece by piece, into the air. You strip the hide the way your grandfather might have, if you'd had one here working from the legs toward the spine, keeping the fur intact. In colonial America, wolf pelts were worth more than a month's wages for some men. But most here won't be sold. They'll be cut to size, the fur turned inward and sewn into the lining of boots. In winters like this, that meant survival. A strip of wolf fur against the skin kept the cold from numbing the toes, a detail so practical it outlived every superstition about wolves themselves. You think about that as you fold the first hide over your arm, fur brushing against your wrist like an animal that's forgotten what it was. The others drag carcasses toward the fire, not to burn them whole, but to singe off what can't be used. The flames leap higher for a moment, orange flaring against the grey wall of fog. The smell sharpens, sweet and bitter at once. One man swears softly and pulls back, his eyes watering. "Smells like hell's cooking breakfast," he mutters. You answer without looking up. Better than hell eating dinner. A few laughing quick laughs, but real. You step back from the fire, wiping your knife on a scrap of cloth that's more holes than fabric. The smoke follows you, clinging to your coat, your hair. It sinks into your gloves. There's no leaving it behind, no, it's in you. Beyond the fire, the fog is close enough that the trees are only suggestions, their black shapes blurred at the edges. The sea's breath drifts in between the trunks, carrying a faint hiss where water meets rock. You can't see it, but you can feel it in the damp weight on your face. A rope is strung between two cabins, and hides are hung there to dry dark shapes against the shifting white. The fur moves slightly when the wind changes, and for a moment it looks like they're breathing again. You turn away before the thought can settle. The smoke and fog thicken together, until the clearing feels like a room with no walls. You can see far, but you can feel the edges, the cold on your neck, the grit of salt under your tongue, the faint warmth where the fire licks at the air. Someone is boiling broth in a blackened pot. the liquid rippling with grease from the meat you cut free. You crouch beside it, the steam ghosting up into your face. It smells of salt and fat, a comfort you didn't expect to want. You remember hearing, once, that soldiers in the old wars used to rub animal fat into their boots to keep them waterproof. You wonder if the same trick might work here if the wolves, even in death, can still keep you walking. The fire pops, sending a spray of sparks into the fog. They vanish instantly, swallowed whole. It makes you think about how quickly warmth can be erased in this place. You take your broth to the slope and sit with your back to the storeroom. From here, the smoke drifts past you, then out toward the sea. It threads itself into the fog, disappearing into the same nothing that took the sound of the wolves' howls. The air is so still that you can hear the quiet settling ashes falling in the fire, a rope creaking as hides shift, the far-off sigh of the tide. Every sound is small but carries far. The broth is hot enough to burn your tongue, but you don't mind. It tastes like the difference between being here tomorrow and not. When you finish, the bowl leaves a faint ring of grease on your gloves. You wipe it off and stand, looking once more at the mingling of smoke and fog. It's beautiful in a way you don't want to admit, like two ghosts meeting and deciding not to fight. You wonder if, weeks from now, someone else will pass through this place and smell it, still the brine, the char, the musk of wolves, woven into the boards of the cabins and the soil underfoot. The fog thickens again, closing the clearing in. You watch the fire burn lower, the smoke's column shortening until it no longer rises above the roofs. Somewhere beyond the trees, the sea keeps breathing, patient as ever. And for the first time since the howls began, you feel your own breath matching its pace. The fog thins as you move inland, shredding itself on the tips of pines until it's nothing but a memory on your clothes. Behind you, the clearing has gone erased by distance, by the night that's settling in. Ahead, the land opens into something stranger than forest or shore, a wide expanse that at first looks like snow. The moon is high now, pale and sharp, and it makes the ground glow. Not the soft glow of winter drifts, but a hard, crystalline light that stabs at your eyes when you stare too long. You squint, and the whiteness resolves into jagged crusts and frozen ripples, salt, layered and packed, stretching out like a frozen sea that forgot how to melt. Your first step crunches. The sound is brittle, like breaking glass under a blanket. The second step sinks you ankle deep in something coarser than snow, but just as cold. Grains roll into your boots, melting into brine that immediately chills your skin. The air here is different, drier, sharper, as if every breath you take is being measured out. It carries the faint metallic tang of salt mixed with a smell like old shells left too long in the sun. You taste it without meaning to. Colonial journals sometimes called this salt snow, a winter quirk of the coastal flats. Sea spray would freeze on contact with the ground, layering into pale crusts that caught and held the moonlight like a mirror. To travellers, it was both a blessing and a curse, easy to cross when the weather was mild, treacherous when frozen hard. Your boots scrape across a patch where the wind has scoured the surface flat. The reflection blinds you for a moment, and you have to look away, staring into the dark seam of the horizon. It's like walking through a desert at night, only here. The sand will burn your skin with cold instead of heat. The group spreads out slightly, each person choosing their own line through the crust. Every few steps, someone stumbles when a patch gives way, spilling them into knee-deep drifts of loose salt. The curses that follow are muted, half swallowed by the night. You think about modern snow boots, the kind with thick soles and waterproof shells, the ones people wear to walk their dogs in city parks after a light dusting. Those boots would have laughed at this. Yours, cobbled together from leather and wool, are already soaked, the seams stiffening with frost. The moon throws shadows like spears across the ground. Each ripple in the salt is outlined in black, and when you look at them too long, they seem to move, sliding toward you, then away, depending on how you shift your head. It's a trick of light, but you still find yourself glancing over your shoulder. Somewhere to your left, a low, rhythmic thump rises and falls. At first you think it's the tide, but the sound is too steady. It's just one of the others stamping their feet to keep the blood moving. You copy the motion and feel the sting of pins and needles rush back into your toes. The wind is a constant presence now, not fierce, but insistent. It runs its fingers through your hair, pushes at your coat, slips between your scarf and your neck. Every time it changes direction, it brings a different temperature, as if the air itself can't decide what season it belongs to. The salt snow clings to your gloves when you steady yourself on the ground. Under the top crust, it's damp and gritty, and it leaves a white film on the leather. You wipe it off and watch the powder drift away in the moonlight, scattering into the air like something alive. Someone in the group calls for a halt. You gather together in a loose circle, the crunch of boots replaced by the soft hiss of wind across the flats. Breath hangs in the air between you, drifting upward until it dissolves into the pale sky. No one says much. Words feel too loud here, as if they might crack the crust and drop you into whatever waits beneath. You take a swallow from your canteen. The water tastes faintly of salt now, even though it came from the creek miles back. Everything does. These days water, bread, the air itself. You wonder if your blood tastes the same. A shadow passes over the moon, stretching the darkness in every direction. You look up to see a cloud dragging itself slowly across the light. In the dimmer glow, the flats lose their mirror edge, becoming something softer, less hostile. For a moment, you can almost imagine lying down here and letting the cold seep into you until you can't feel where your body ends. But the cloud moves on, and the light returns, harsher than before. The group starts walking again, the sound of your steps sinking into a rhythm you don't have to think about. Crunch, shift, crunch, inhale, exhale, taste the salt, blink against the glare. You pass a patch where the surface has been broken into jagged pieces. The wind has polished the edges until they're smooth as glass. In the moonlight, they look like the teeth of something enormous, half buried and waiting. You don't mention it to anyone. The ground rises slightly ahead, and when you reach the crest, you see the flat stretching on farther than you'd hoped. In the distance, the dark line of the tree line marks your destination, but it feels as far away as another season. Someone stumbles hard to your right, going down on both knees. The sound is sharp, like breaking a plate. You help them up, brushing the salt from their coat. It falls away in sheets, clattering softly against the crust before vanishing into the surface. The wind shifts again, carrying with it the faintest smell of smoke. It's too far to tell if it's from your camp or something ahead, but it's enough to quicken your steps. Smoke means fire, and fire means warmth, or danger, sometimes both. You focus on the rhythm again. Crunch, shift, crunch. The sound becomes a metronome, marking the slow progress across the endless white. Every so often, the moon catches in a grain of salt just right, and it flashes like a tiny star at your feet. You start counting them, just to give your mind something to do. When the tree line finally grows taller in your vision, you feel the tension in your shoulders ease a fraction. The salt underfoot gives way to frozen earth, and the crunch softens. The cold is still there, biting at your ears and wrists, but it feels different now, less endless. You glance back once, over the flats, under the moon. They look untouched, your tracks already blurring as the wind shifts the top layer. In another hour, there will be no sign you were here at all, and maybe that's the strangest part, that a place so hard to cross could also be so quick to forget you. The trees close in quickly, the salt flats disappearing behind you like a dream that dissolves the moment you wake. Underfoot, the crunch softens into the muffled snap of twigs and the hiss of frost under leather soles. The air changes, too less sharp, more layered. You smell earth, pine, and somewhere ahead, the faint promise of smoke. You follow it. The path is hardly a path at all, just a break in the undergrowth where the snow lies thinner. Your breath fogs the air, but it no longer vanishes into a vast open sky. Here it hangs between trunks, curling upward until it disappears into the darkness above. The smoke grows stronger, tinged with something rich and oily. You know that smell fish, though not the fresh, wet scent from a net, nor the sour rot of the flats. This is different, warm, deep, transformed. Your stomach remembers hunger before your mind does. You spot the glow, first a pulse of amber behind a low rise. The others see it too, and you can feel the shift in their steps, the way cold legs learn how to move faster when they want to. When you crest the rise, You find them a small circle of figures crouched around a pit half sunk into the ground. Smoke billows from it in lazy coils, slipping out between flat stones stacked like an uneven chimney. They turn as one not startled, not hostile, just watchful. The firelight throws their faces into relief, carving the lines deeper, catching in eyes that reflect more than the flames. One of them, an older man wrapped in a hide that still carries the shape of the animal, stands and gestures you closer. His hand is bare, the skin cracked but steady. The gesture says come, but not without measure. You glance at your group. No one moves at first. Then you take the step. The others follow. The heat is subtle at first, the way it seeps from the pit into your boots, up your legs. You look inside and see the sauce fish holes split or cut into long strips hanging on wooden racks suspended over a slow fire. The flames themselves are small, buried under a layer of smoking kelp and damp wood. A younger woman kneels to adjust the racks, using a stick to shift a piece of glowing charcoal. She glances at you without stopping her work. In the colonies, this method was known among the native coastal tribes for generations before ships ever arrived from across the ocean. The pit kept the heat low and even, drying the fish slowly so it could last for months without spoiling. Buried under snow or kept in sealed skin bags, it would feed a family long after the rivers froze. The older man says something you don't understand. His voice is low and even, like he's telling you the weather in a language you don't yet speak. One of your group tries a greeting in broken phrases, and the man answers with a small nod. He picks up a strip of fish and hands it to you. The skin is leathery, the flesh darker than you expect. It smells like the inside of a smokehouse sweet, salty, and something else that belongs only to this place. You bite. The salt hits first, then the chew of the flesh, firm but not tough. The smoke lingers in your mouth long after you swallow, and with it comes a warmth that has nothing to do with the fire. You thank him the only way you can, with a nod that mirrors his. Around the pit, the group begins to loosen packs set down, gloves peeled off, hands extended toward the low heat. The conversation is mostly in gestures, a hand pointing at the racks, a finger tracing the air to show how long the fish has been there. You point to your boots, pantomime cold feet, and one of the women laughs softly, the sound like a twig snapping in slow motion. Someone from your side offers a strip of dried meat from your stores. It's taken, examined, sniffed, and passed around. There's no rush to taste it. Here, food is not novelty, it's survival. The pit smoulders on, the smoke climbing into the night and mingling with the faint mist that lingers between the trees. The air is thick with it, and you realise you'll carry this smell with you for days. You don't mind. A younger boy, no more than 12, crouches beside you, pointing at your coat and then at his own. His is made from stitched-together hides, fur turned inward, edges bound with strips of something darker. He tugs at the cuff, showing the layer of woven grass beneath. You imagine the hours it took to make, the way the cold taught his hands to move. Someone in your group asks about the pits, miming digging into the ground. The older man watches, then walks to the edge of the clearing and kicks at the snow until the dark outline of another pit appears. He pulls away a mat of reeds to reveal the faint warmth rising from beneath. Stored for later. Modern freezers hum and click. These pits breathe and wait. The difference is mostly in the noise. You're given more fish, this time wrapped in kelp and tied with a strip of bark. You tuck it into your pack, feeling its weight settle against the rest of your supplies. It's not much, but it's a promise of another day, another walk, another fire. The older man speaks again, a longer string of words this time. His hand sweeps toward the south, then back to the pit. You catch none of it, but you understand enough the road ahead is long, warmth is rare. The group begins to rise, gathering packs, tightening straps. The exchange is simple nods, brief touches to the arm or shoulder, the way eyes hold a moment longer before moving on. You take one last look at the pit, the fish still swaying gently over the hidden flames. As you turn away, the smoke trails after you, threading through the branches, clinging to your hair and coat. The warmth fades with each step, replaced by the cold bite of night air, but something lingers, steadying, like a coal banked in your chest. You glance back once. The figures are already fading into the trees. the glow of the pit dimming until it's just another patch of moonlight. The smell stays longer than the sight. Ahead, the path bends toward the dark, and you follow it, the memory of smoke and salt carried with you into whatever waits beyond. You keep walking south, the smoke still in your clothes, when the thought sneaks in uninvited, absurd, but insistent. If you were home right now, whom in the 21st century your food would be sitting in a box that hums quietly in the corner of your kitchen, a white, humming cube that pretends it's winter all year round, and you wouldn't even think about it until the light on the ice maker blinked red. Here, there's no hum, only the slow sigh of wind moving between the trees, and the memory of that hitchkey you just left behind. You think of the fish hanging over the coals, absorbing smoke the way your coat has. Hours pass before it's ready. Days, maybe. Your freezer back home. It can take a raw steak and make it a brick in under 3 hours. You've done it, probably while scrolling through your phone, not even aware of the cold building inside until you open the door and feel it bite your skin for a second before the heater swallows it again. The pit fire doesn't bite, it seeps. It moves in slow, deliberate layers, touching everything it can reach, leaving behind a taste that will linger long after the fish is gone. You remember the old man's hands, cracked and strong, adjusting the racks with the kind of precision most people reserve for things they love. You can't picture anyone staring into their freezer with that kind of patience. Colonial records say that smoking fish wasn't just about flavour, it was about insurance. You kept enough in the pits. You could survive a river freezing solid, a supply ship delayed, a winter stretching longer than your calendar promised. Now insurance is a phone call and a delivery truck, or a supermarket lit so bright you could tan under the fluorescence. Aisles lined with ice cream you'll complain about being too frozen when you get home. The trail dips, and you step over a half-frozen stream. The water moves under a glassy sheet, whispering secrets you can't hear. You picture dropping a fish in there, how quickly it would stiffen, how clean the cold would be. No cords, no hum, no monthly bill, just nature, unpaid and indifferent. Your boots crunch in rhythm, and for a moment you imagine you're walking the aisles of a grocery store instead. The cartwheels wobbling as you pass freezers filled with bags of pre-cut vegetables and chicken nuggets in cheerful boxes. Here, aisle means tree line, and the shelves are whatever you can find or trade for. You feel the weight of the smoked fish in your pack, its solidity against your spine. That weight is comfort, not because it's convenient, but because you saw the work that went into it. Modern freezers have a way of erasing the story of food. You open the door and there it is, silent, uniform. No hint of the river it swam in or the hands that caught it. The hitchkey leaves no doubt. Every strip of fish carries the smell of the fire, the texture of the racks, the hours it spent suspended over heat that was never too much, never too little. It's not uniform. Some pieces are darker, some edges curled from where the smoke hits stronger. The wind shifts, and you catch the ghost of that smell again. It cuts through the scent of pine and frost like a memory slipping back into the present. You pass a fallen tree, the trunk hollowed by rot. Inside, the air is warmer than you expect. You think about how someone, somewhere, might use it like a natural cupboard tuck food in. Cover it. Let the earth do the rest. No manual, no settings, just instinct and necessity. You try to imagine explaining a freezer to the people by the pit. How would you even start? It's a box that makes cold. They would ask why, and you'd have to tell them to keep food longer. Then they'd point to their pit, to the smoked fish hanging over the coals, and the conversation would end there. The path opens into a small clearing, the ground dusted with snow so thin it looks like flour. You stop for a moment, adjusting your pack, and realize the silence here is so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. In your kitchen, you'd hear the freezer's compressor kick in, the low mechanical growl reminding you it's always working even when you're not. You start walking again, boots breaking the crust with soft, deliberate sounds. The freezer is, in its way, a marvel. It can keep strawberries red in January and ice cream solid in August. It can let you forget the seasons entirely. But the H-key, it doesn't let you forget. It reminds you of every season that led to this moment, the fishing, the cleaning, the fire building, the tending. It reminds you that food isn't a product, it's an event. Your breath comes slower now, the cold turning each inhale into something tangible. You think about what it would be like to trade places, leave your century behind for theirs, and theirs for yours. Would they marvel at the frost on your freezer shelves, or would they open the door, feel the rush of cold air, and nod like it was the most ordinary thing in the world? You smile at the thought, though the cold makes it feel like your face might crack. Somewhere in that smile is the truth you don't say out loud. Convenience is a kind of forgetting. And maybe forgetting is a luxury you can't always afford. As the trail bends west, the smell of smoke fades for good, replaced by the faint briny tang that means the sea isn't far. You glance over your shoulder, half expecting to see the old man by the pit, adjusting the racks like you left him. But the forest is empty, the path behind you already blurred by drifting snow. The smoked fish shifts in your pack as you walk, its weight steady, certain. A freezer keeps food cold. A H-key keeps food alive in a different way, through memory, through work, through the heat that seeps into you just from thinking about it. You keep walking, the hum of modern machines fading from your mind, replaced by the slow, patient breath of the fire you left behind. The path bends again, leading you along the edge of a low ridge where the trees thin out. Beyond them, the horizon blurs into a grey wash, neither sea nor sky, just a line where the cold stops explaining itself. That's when you hear it half-whispered, carried by the wind from the two men walking ahead. They don't mean for you to catch it, but the words slide between the crunch of boots and the creak of leather straps. Fair Namam Hon. It's a rumour you've heard before, though it changes with each telling. Sometimes it's a river that never freezes, its banks soft with green even in January. Sometimes it's a valley where the snow melts a month before the rest of the world remembers how. And sometimes, no, it's just warmer. No details, no proof, just the shape of a promise. You keep walking, letting the thoughts settle into your pack alongside the smoked fish and salt-stiff gloves. Warmer. The word tastes strange here, like something you used to eat but can't quite remember the flavour of. The air shifts, not enough to be felt, only noticed. It smells faintly different, less sharp, more like water that's been sitting in a wooden cup. You breathe in again, trying to tell if it's real or just your mind leaning toward hope. In colonial winters, hope travelled faster than ships. A rumour could leap from one camp to the next, carried by traders, hunters, even strangers with nothing more than a good story and the confidence to tell it. Sometimes the place was real, sometimes it wasn't. What mattered was that it kept people moving. The group pauses at a frozen creek, the ice groaning softly under their weight as they cross. You crouch at the edge, running your fingers over the surface. Beneath the ice, water still moves, slow and dark. You wonder if it knows something you doubt if it's heading south already, chasing whatever warmth is left in the world. When you stand, the leader is already pointing with his chin toward the bend in the trail. "We'll leave a fire here," he says, almost to himself. You know why? Fires are messages as much as they are warmth. To anyone who finds them, they say someone was here. Someone survived long enough to leave you this. You gather wood half-frozen branches, curls of bark, even a strip of dried kelp from someone's pack. The fire starts slow, coughing smoke into the cold air before the flames take hold. You watch it grow, the orange licking up into the blue-white day. The smoke rises in a straight column, barely bending in the wind. It will be visible from far off. Maybe that's the point. As the fire steadies, you take a step back and look at it the way a stranger might. It's small, almost modest, but it glows in the shadow of the ridge like it belongs here. You imagine someone finding it hours from no, hands numb, feet stiff and leaning in close enough to feel their heartbeat slow. The group starts moving again, and you follow, glancing back once. The fire is still there, a stubborn bead of colour against the pale world. The trail narrows, hemmed in by thorny brush that snags at your coat. You think about the south, not the compass direction, the idea of it. Warmth as destination, heat as reward. In your own time, you'd book a ticket, scroll through weather apps, read reviews of beaches and cafes. Here, warmth is not a place you visit, it's a place you earn, 1 mile at a time. The wind changes again, brushing against your cheek in a way that almost feels soft. You close your eyes and let it linger, even if it's just a trick. Colonial records tell of families walking for weeks toward rumoured havens, guided by little more than the sun and the angle of rivers. Some made it, others turned back, or never turned up again. Still, the stories never stopped. Maybe they couldn't, maybe people needed them too much. You hear laughter up ahead, sharp and sudden. Someone has tripped on a root and gone down, cursing in a way that makes the rest of the group grin. The moment passes quickly, but it leaves a trace in the air, a reminder that not everything here is quiet endurance. The ground underfoot changes less frost, more grit. You notice it in the sound first, then in the way your boots grip instead of slide. You crouch to touch it and find a scatter of pebbles mixed with pale sand. You straighten, scanning the trees. The branches here are thinner, spaced farther apart. Light falls differently, not filtered through thick needles, but spilling down in wider, warmer shafts. It's not much, but it's something. The leader slows, letting the group bunch up again. "We keep south," he says. "If it's there, we find it. If it's not," he doesn't finish. He doesn't have to. You adjust your pack, feeling the pull of straps across your shoulders. The smoked fish shifts inside, a small, steady weight that feels more certain than the rumour you're chasing. But you walk anyway, because even if the warmth isn't there, the walking is. As the ridge dips, the fire you left is gone from sight. You picture it burning lower, embers collapsing into themselves, smoke fading into the sky until there's nothing left but a faint scent on the wind. Maybe that's the real promise, not the place you're going, but the heat you leave behind for someone else. You walk on, the trail bending south, the word warmer still sitting in your mind like a coal that refuses to die. The trail bends between two bare hills, and for the first time in hours you can see the whole group at once. That's when you start counting. 1, 2, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 14. You slow your pace, counting again in case you missed someone, but the number doesn't change. 14. It used to be 23. You remember the start, not the very beginning. Maybe, but close enough. Faces you didn't know yet. Walking with that early kind of energy that thinks cold is just a thing you endure until the sun changes its mind. Now the air is heavier. The gaps between people are wider. The conversations that used to drift along the trail like smoke are gone. All that's left is the rhythm of boots and breath. You feel your own heartbeat, slow but deliberate, thumping under the layers of wool and leather. In a kitchen back home, you'd barely notice it. Out here, it's the loudest sound you own. You keep walking, but the number follows you. 14. You try to picture where the others are now, some you know gone in the storm, buried under snow so deep you couldn't dig them out if you wanted to. 1, maybe 2, vanished without a sound, leaving nothing but a bedroll and the shape of their body in the frost. Colonial records tell the same story. Over and over, departure numbers shrinking as the miles pile up. Fever, frostbite, accidents that sound like misfortune until you see them enough to realise they're just the math of the season. The ground here is hard, almost metallic under your boots. The wind comes low and steady, pressing at your coat like it wants to see what's underneath. You taste salt again, faint, but there, carried from the coast you can't see anymore. Someone coughs behind you, short, sharp, then gone. No one turns around. Coughs are as common as footsteps now. You pass a patch of frozen ground where the snow has been kicked away. It's just dirt and stones, but the sight of bare earth feels almost violent after so much white. You glance at it again before it's gone behind you. 14. The number keeps its shape in your head, refusing to blur. You imagine lining them up, side by side, just to see what survival looks like in human form. It's not strength alone, you know that now. It's luck, timing, maybe the stubbornness to take one more step than someone else. The leader calls a halt near a clump of wind-bent pines. You drop your pack and sit on it, letting the cold creep into your legs. 14 people settle around you in loose circles. A few take swigs from canteens. One chews slowly on something pulled from a pocket. You think about food again, not what you have, but what you don't. The smoked fish is still there in your pack, heavier in your thoughts than it is in weight. You could share it now, but that would just make 14 smaller in another way. Someone laughs quietly at something you don't catch. It's not the loud, open kind of laugh, it's quick, almost embarrassed, like it's slipped out without permission. Still, it's a sound that bends the air in a different shape for a moment. The sun is lower now, a pale coin pressed flat against the horizon. Its light doesn't warm, but it changes the colour of the frost, turning it the shade of tarnished silver. Shadows stretch long across the trail, linking one person to the next in dark, uneven threads. In the colonies, losing this many on a journey wasn't unusual. Some records note the numbers in neat columns beside cargo lists, as if people and barrels were the same kind of loss. You wonder if someone will write about you that way, left with 23, arrived with 14. Salt, fish, wool. The leader starts moving again, and you shoulder your pack. The straps bite into your collarbone, but you don't adjust them. The discomfort is something to hold on to. It reminds you you're still here. The trail dips into a hollow where the wind doesn't reach. The air is still, and you can hear the faint rustle of fabric as the group walks. It's the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts too clearly. You glance at the faces ahead, pale, wind-burned, some with frost in their eyebrows. You don't know all their names, but you know their steps, their breathing, the way each one shifts their weight when the ground changes. 14 lives moving in the same direction, for now. The hollow opens onto a slope, and from the top you can see a line of dark trees against the fading light. They look closer than they probably are. Distances out here are like that, measured in hope first, miles second. You think about the 14 again. The number could drop. You know that. Everyone does. But you keep walking because stopping doesn't make the number go up. A gust of wind hits as you crest the slope, carrying with it the smell of pine and something faintly sweet sap, maybe, or the memory of a fire burned long ago. You pull your scarf higher, not against the cold, but to keep the smell a little longer. The leader raises a hand, pointing to a flat stretch ahead. "We camp there," he says. 14 shadows nod in agreement. As you make your way down, you glance over your shoulder one last time. The trail behind you is a thread fraying into the dark. Somewhere back there are the 9 who didn't make it, their places on the path already taken by wind and snow. You turn forward again, the sound of your heartbeat steady in your ears. 14. And you. You're warm now. The cold, the salt, the wind, they're all somewhere far behind you, folded into a story that's done its work and can rest for the night. You're here, in your own bed, the blanket soft and certain against your skin. Outside, the wind still moves. You can hear it testing the window, brushing past the walls, but it doesn't touch you here. It's just sound part of the night, steady and harmless. Take a slow breath in and let it out. Again, breathe in, deep enough to feel your ribs expand. Hold it for a moment, then let the air leave in its own time. Imagine it carrying the weight of the journey with it each step across ice. Each breath of salt, air drifting away into nothing. Your shoulders sink into the bed. The muscles in your neck release. Even your jaw loosens. The way rope goes slack when a ship finds calm water. You've crossed the winter. You've counted the living. You've left the fire for whoever comes next. Now there's only the warmth and the soft rhythm of your breathing. Close your eyes. Let the last image be the glow of that fire, small but sure, against the endless white. Let it burn steady as you drift, the ember of a story you can pick up again another night. You're safe, you're home, and the winter, for now, is over. You're still lying there, the blanket pulled high enough to cover your ears from the draft. Outside, the wind has settled into that low, steady hum, the same hum you heard on the wharf when the boards swayed under your boots and the sea mist tried to pull you back inside. It's strange how memory carries a temperature. In your mind, the air still bites with salt and cold, but here, it's only the faint coolness sneaking in through a badly sealed window. On the nightstand, there's a small jar of sea salt. Not from that winter, of course, just something you bought on a summer trip, a novelty to sprinkle over grilled fish. But tonight, in the quiet, it feels heavier. You think of the barrels stacked in the dark, the way the keys felt warmer than hands, the way every locked door held a weight bigger than the snow outside. And you can't help but wonder, what would you have done? Guarded it like gold, or broken the lock for a neighbour? History doesn't answer that for you. But it whispers you're not the first to ask. Colonial ledgers, weather diaries, even private letters hint the cold wasn't the worst part. It was the arguments whispered in taverns, the sudden silences when certain names were spoken, the friendships that thawed slower than the ice. You close your eyes, and the room shifts. The bed becomes a narrow pallet against a wall of unpainted planks. The air tastes of boiled turnip and ash. Outside the door, someone is stacking firewood in neat, nervous piles. You hear the thud of each log, the short exhale between lifts. It's the night before you leave the village. The fire is low, but no one feeds it, too afraid to waste even a splinter of dry wood. In the corner, a child sleeps with a shoe on, the only one they have, the leather stiff with salt from the shore. Their breath fogs the air between you in tiny clouds. When you wake from that memory, you're still here, in your bed, the clock ticking faintly. But the questions remain. You remember reading once about the winter of 1780 when New York Harbor froze solid. People walked from Manhattan to Staten Island over ice thick enough to hold wagons. Supplies from the south couldn't get through, and prices for salt always salt rose until it was worth stealing. And just like in your village, the real stories weren't about the weather, but about who shared and who didn't. Maybe that's why history keeps those details in the margins too human to fit in the main text. Somewhere in the fog of your mind, a question takes root. What if it hadn't been the winter at all? What if people had made it worse on purpose? That's the kind of question historians still argue about, sifting through brittle paper and salt-stained ink. And maybe it's one we'll take up next time, when the fire's burning low again. For now, listen to the room. The faint tick of something settling in the wall, the way the wind finds that one place in the siding to hum through. If you breathe slow enough, you can match it in 2-3 out 2-3. Let the last of the salt leave your mouth. Let the cold air stay on the other side of the glass. And if the dream comes, the one with the fog, the bell, the locked doors, you'll know exactly where you are. You've been there before. You came back. The air in your room is warmer now, or maybe it's just you settling deeper into the covers. Your hands find each other under the blanket, fingers lacing in the quiet. Outside, the wind shifts, no longer from the sea but from somewhere inland, carrying a drier scent. It reminds you of the first thaw muddy, ugly, but alive. Breathe in 2-3, hold, let it out slow. Somewhere far away, in another century, someone else is lying in the dark, listening to a different wind. They don't know you, and you don't know them, but you share the need for warmth, for safety, for a night that ends without loss. In the corner of your mind, the village still stands, fog curling over the rooftops, the bell silent, the storehouse doors closed. You walk past it, not to open it, not to judge what's inside, but simply to know it's there. History is full of locked doors like that. Some you open, some you leave closed, and some you only visit in dreams. So tonight, let the dream take you where it wants. Let it show you the salt snow glowing under the moon, or the wharf's tired boards, or the jar of sea salt waiting on your nightstand. Wherever it takes you, you're only visiting, and you can leave whenever you like. In 2-3 out 2-3, sleep, traveller. The road is long, but the bed is yours for now. And tonight, the salt stays in the barrel, and you're warm enough to forget it. Stay with the quiet a little longer. Let your thoughts move the way fog does over water slow certain, choosing where to settle without asking. The room offers small kindnesses you only notice now the weight of the blanket on your shins, the mild scent of clean cotton, and the way the pillow holds the shape of your cheek. Nothing here demands. Everything permits. If a stray worry knocks, let it pass like a loose shutter in the wind. You don't have to fix the house tonight. You just listen to it breathe. Somewhere, the story's keys are still hanging on their pegs, warmer than hands. They will be there in the morning if you want them. For now, the door can stay closed. Breathe in through the nose count 3, hold 1, whisper the breath out, as if you're not trying to wake the fire. Again in 2-3, hold. Out 2-3, feel your ribs widen like a tide coming in, then ease like water sliding back across smooth stones. Imagine a coastline drawn in dull silver. The bell you heard earlier is only a buoy now, rocking politely, keeping time for fishermen you'll never meet. The salt in the air is memory, not hunger. The smoke is comfort, not alarm. Walk that shore as slowly as you like. Your footprints fill with harmless water. Your shadow lies down and becomes a seal at rest. When you turn inland, the path is soft. Needles give underfoot. The air warms 1/2 degree, then another, the way morning does when it remembers you. Every locked thing you pass has chosen to sleep, not to resist. Place the jar of salt back on the nightstand in your mind. It's only crystal and light. In 2-3, out 2-3. Good night, now. The fire in your mind has gone quiet. The last echoes of that colonial winter feel like a dream dissolving. But one thing lingers, sharper than the smoke, the taste of salt. Not the pinch on your dinner tonight, but salt as it was before supermarkets, before plastic shakers on cafe tables, before you could spill it carelessly on the floor and only worry about the superstition of 7 years bad luck. For most of human history, salt was weight. It was sweat turned into crystal. It was the line between a harvest that lasted the season and a village that rotted in its own plenty. The Romans called it sal. From that syllable came salary because soldiers, those iron-hearted men who kept an empire sprawling, were sometimes paid in salt. The empire's lifeblood marched not only on grain and steel, but on tiny grains that stung open wounds and preserved pork in the camps. Across the sea, in China, dynasties rose and fell on the flow of salt. One emperor's reform could make it cheap as air. The next could bind it with taxes so tight that smuggling became the only way to breathe. Entire stretches of desert carried mule caravans not for silk, not for jade, but for this white dust that melted on the tongue and kept reese edible through winter. In medieval Europe, cathedrals were not the only monuments. There were the salt roads paved arteries where merchants dragged wagons heavy as stone, their wheels crunching over gravel towards cities whose wealth glowed brightest when their cellars stayed dry. A sack of salt could buy a cloak. A barrel of it could buy a man's freedom, or his silence. And always, wherever it piled high and shadowed storehouses, there were locks. The key dangled from a belt, or sat beneath a magistrate's pillow, or rusted in the chest of a steward who slept easily knowing hunger sharpened obedience. Salt was not flavour. It was leverage. It was power, compressed into crystals small enough to dissolve in a drop of sweat. Even now, on your table, it waits in a humble glass shaker and you hardly look at it. But if you close your eyes and taste it against your teeth, you're tasting the same mineral that bought armies, crowned emperors, and decided who shivered in the dark and who kept the fire alive. The fire in your mind has gone quiet. The last echoes of that colonial winter feel like a dream dissolving, but one thing lingers, sharper than the smoke, the taste of salt. Not the pinch on your dinner tonight, but salt as it was before supermarkets, before plastic shakers on cafe tables, before you could spill it carelessly on the floor and only worry about the superstition of 7 years bad luck. For most of human history, salt was weight. It was sweat turned into crystal. It was the line between a harvest that lasted the season and a village that rotted in its own plenty. The Romans called it sal. From that syllable came salary because soldiers, those iron-hearted men who kept an empire sprawling, were sometimes paid in salt. The empire's lifeblood marched not only on grain and steel, but on tiny grains that stung open wounds and preserved pork in the camps. Across the sea, in China, dynasties rose and fell on the flow of salt. One emperor's reform could make it cheap as air. The next could bind it with taxes so tight that smuggling became the only way to breathe. Entire stretches of desert carried mule caravans not for silk, not for jade, but for this white dust that melted on the tongue and kept rice edible through winter. In medieval Europe, cathedrals were not the only monuments. There were the salt roads paved arteries where merchants dragged wagons heavy as stone, their wheels crunching over gravel towards cities whose wealth glowed brightest when their cellars stayed dry. A sack of salt could buy a cloak. A barrel of it could buy a man's freedom, or his silence. And always, wherever it piled high in shadowed storehouses, there were locks. The key dangled from a belt, or sat beneath a magistrate's pillow, or rusted in the chest of a steward who slept easily knowing hunger sharpened obedience. Salt was not flavour. It was leverage. It was power, compressed into crystals small enough to dissolve in a drop of sweat. Even now, on your table, it waits in a humble glass shaker and you hardly look at it. But if you close your eyes and taste it against your teeth, you're tasting the same mineral that bought armies, crowned emperors, and decided who shivered in the dark and who kept the fire alive. The image of that key never quite leaves you. Rust on the teeth, weight in the palm, the small, simple shape that decided whether a family lived or starved. Keys have always outlived the hands that held them. In colonial winters, it was the steward's key to the salt house. In medieval towns, it was the merchant's key to the grain silo. During war, it was the officer's key to the ration store. Everywhere, always. The door was the same inside, enough to last the season. Outside, too many hands reaching, and the question never changes who is allowed to open it. Sometimes, the key meant safety. A village shared its salt, and no one froze. Other times, the key meant silence. It jingled on the belt of a man who could walk past his neighbour's hollow eyes without breaking stride. But the truth is more complicated. The man with the key was not always cruel. He, too, feared hunger. He, too, had children whose bones showed through their skin. When you guard a door in winter, you are both saviour and jailer. Every choice cuts, open too wide, and everyone dies faster, close too tight, and the screams follow you into your sleep. We like to think we've left such winters behind, but look closer. The keys are still here. They rattle in the hands of those who decide what medicine costs. They turn quietly in the locks of warehouses stacked with grain while others line up at empty markets. They hum in the codes of servers that hold the data you cannot live without. The material changes: salt, bread, pills, passwords, but the pattern repeats. Someone holds the key, someone waits outside, and you, listening now, are caught in the same question. If survival meant turning the lock while others froze on the step, would you open the door or keep it shut? History won't answer for you. It only whispers that the choice will come again, and when it does, you will feel the weight of cold iron in your hand, just as they did centuries ago. The night settles again, and with it, the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. The story has ended, but its echoes haven't gone. You lie in a bed warmed by central heat, beneath blankets that never knew the weight of frost. On your table sits a shaker of salt, common, overlooked, its grains catching a faint glimmer from the screen. Close your eyes, and that shaker becomes a barrel in a dark storehouse. You can almost hear the lock clicking shut. You can almost feel the fog pressing against the shutters. The memory isn't yours, but it slides into your bones as if it were. History is not only dates or empires, it is the weight of lives lived in silence. It is the taste on your tongue when you lick the corner of your lip and realize you're sharing the same mineral that bound soldiers to empires, that bought or betrayed survival, that turned neighbors into strangers. And in dreams, those neighbors return. A woman tending a hearth that will not light, a boy rattling fish bones in the frost, a man whose hand still grips a useless key. They walk the fog at the edge of your sleep, not demanding, not accusing, only reminding you that they were here. When you wake tomorrow, their names will be gone again. But you may glance at the salt on your plate, and for a moment, you will remember. The locked storehouse, the silence of snow, the question of who holds the key, all of it folds back into the dark. But it lingers just long enough to make you grateful for the heat in your room, the food within reach, the door that does not need a key. So let the story dissolve. Let the salt on your tongue fade to nothing. Let the breath in your chest steady and slow. The past has kept its vigil. Now it hands the watch to you. Sleep, while the fog keeps its own counsel outside the window. And if you dream of locks, may they open easily, and may the storehouses of your night never be empty.